Pressing.
Okay, so it says this meeting is being live
Yep.
streamed.
Okay. Seems like it's a go. So feel free to record.
So I'm recording it also.
Sounds good. Okay. Looks like we're good for now.
Now,
Uh,
did you put the link out for the live yet?
Here, I'm going to set it up. So, hello everybody out there. Hope you can hear me. Leave a message in the comments if everything on the audio end is good. Let us know. And if you want your questions uh answered as well, now's the time. Okay, I'm gonna check that. So we have an amazing guest on today that is very versed in a lot of topics and knowledge of the secrets of the universe. Jonny Enoch, can you introduce yourself a little to the
Thanks for
audience?
having me on your show, Sean. It's been absolutely amazing talking to you and getting to know what you do. I think that the way that you look at psionics and mapping out the blueprint for how we can access certain abilities and how we can tap into the realities all around us is rather remarkable. So you definitely caught my interest. And for me,
Thank
I'm
you.
I'm
I really appreciate
is it working?
that. Um, we're having a little breakup, but it's fine. There'll be
Okay.
things messing with us. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Just let me know
Go ahead.
when we're live and I'll continue with my introduction.
Yeah, go for it. We're good. So
Okay. So when you get a second, shoot me over that link and we'll get everybody that's out there watching this live stream. So my name is Jonny Enoch. I'm an esoteric researcher and I've looked all over the world for clues into some of our most fascinating mysteries. And just like all of you, I've been inspired by my own personal experiences that have taken me on a journey. And you never know where that journey is going to lead. But the greatest mystery of all mysteries, I believe, isn't who built the pyramids or if Atlantis existed. It is who are all of you? Where do you come from? And I think that's the most fascinating thing is that when we go beyond the eye or the subject bubble of time, that we find that there's this unified field or there is a supreme being or a consciousness in the universe that we're all a part of. And what I think that's that why I think that's one of the most exciting realizations is that it brings this oneness to us all and it connects us all right across the board.
well said. So
You look like you're
the
deep in
internal knowledge of what
concentration.
we are.
You're either figuring out the live streamed link or the mysteries of the universe.
Okay, I sent you the link in your Facebook, so feel free to post that. Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. Our self is as a map because everyone's a map of the entire universe inside yourself as a fractal hologram, as if space and time collapsed in on itself as singularity, and then is information is the details in between to allow an experience so that we can understand and know ourselves deeper, which is connection to everything. So everyone is everything. So the self is a big topic, and very few people have any idea how deep that goes. And so with that, nobody truly knows themselves fully. And I don't, with the infinite expansion of yourself and the universe and that being interconnected, I don't think they can ever know it fully unless they catch up to the infinite and then expand with that at the same time. Uh, Either way, it's a great mystery and it's fun and it's beautiful and never boring and nobody should like take it as a negative thing that you can't know everything. But as you can know more constantly, and that is the journey and discovery and the mystery to solve in each of our individual perspectives and awareness and our senses and what comes to us in the fractal nature of source and all consciousness that's providing so that each fractal can learn something new and it all culminate that together for greater growth. Did you find the link?
Yeah, I found the link and well said. I truly believe that we live in an intelligent universe. And our universe has a symphony to it, and it is always communicating to us, not only through these various quantum entanglements, but we know that there is a peristasis of oscillating thoughts, that everything is connected, and it oscillates very much with you. And some of you might have certain terms that you've used, like you've used omens or synchronicities, which is a term that came from Carl Jung. But truly, the universe is always trying to give you signs. It's always giving you this feedback if you know what to look for. And sometimes that might be just as simple as looking at a photograph. And in a photograph, you're going to see an anomalous light or structure that's going to give you a message that pertains to something that was going on in your life. You never know how it's communicating to us. Did you lose your audio, Sean? Oh, we got you back.
Very true. And like if a photo is worth 1,000 words, like the photon and the infinite information held within, as like what we know with optic cables where light holds information, and then it's all fractal of itself. Probably more than 1,000 words we can use to describe that. And the translation ability of gleaming at a photon of light and opening it up and perceiving it empathically is how I do knowingness abilities. So those are fun. So how did you get into this expansive conscious awareness that you're in, and what inspired you to go down this pathway?
Well, that's a very good question. And before we dive into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what you were just saying and the universe, and also about pictures. You know, you could have negative ions. You can have so much that there's so much there we can decode when we look at light and when we look over at, let's say, what we call a photograph. You know, very interestingly enough, there's a friend of mine that's involved with special projects. And they had told me that over 30 years ago, they were stationed over into one of the archipelago areas of Indonesia. You know where that is? All those little islands they have. They have these crazy amount of islands over by Indonesia, these areas that are set up. And they were doing a sort of an experiment with, I believe it was an ASI lightning bolt ballistic flash. And they're exuding incredible amounts of energy, just like what we see with the Philadelphia experiment. And I have been told there have been certain classified technologies available that were able to photograph or capture things hundreds, if not thousands of years in the past. Moreover, I want to say to everybody out there that when it comes to the universe, you are no exception. There's a macrocosm of the universe right under our noses right now. And Sean, you're a guy that fascinates me the way that you look over at these subjects, because when you were telling me about your own psychic exploration of things, you were going down to the quantum subspace. You were going down and changing the electron shell outside of something and looking at it from a quantum physics perspective, which I love. Well, if we take an atom and we have the electron whizzing around the nucleus, let's go below that, smash that. Let's go down to the subatomic particles, okay? And all of you, you know, all of you are made of atoms, okay? So in you right now, we could say there's 100 trillion atoms in a cell, 100 trillion cells in an atom, and 100 trillion atoms in a cell. And atoms are made of mostly blank spaces, which is absolutely fascinating to look at from that perspective. But when we go down into subatomic particles that we find through your body, let's say we look at the mitochondria in your cell right now, that we have quarks, neutrinos, hadrons, leptons. Now, before we go down to gluons and bosons, let's just leave that list right there. Let's stop over at leptons. Let's split a lepton. We go down to leptons, we have these things called muons. And inside of muons, we're told you could fit an entire galaxy in one of those. So think about the profundities of who we are. Think about the profundities of where we come from and this realization, which after talking to you, Sean, and your incredible philosophy and grasp of physics and spiritual phenomenon, there is no doubt a deeper understanding you have of these things. So that's where I come at it from myself, where having had experiences all my life, like out of body experiences, or you see something that you can't explain, or in my life, I grew up in a very religious household where I wasn't allowed to ask for any answers about these things. Everything was the devil. You're sitting at the dinner table at my house growing up, and the word helicopter got changed to heavenicopter. So for me, when other kids were hiding certain magazines under their bed, I was hiding these esoteric books and crystals and things like that under my bed. So I would say that this deeper searching that we look for answers, if you truly look for these things, you will find them. They really, truly do exist. There are things that exist upon this earth that and beyond that will absolutely blow your mind. But sometimes you have to be prepared for what you ask for. The average person, I'm just going to put this out there for your listeners. The average person that is watching this right now, you aren't fully prepared for the shock your psyche will get if you come face to face with an extraterrestrial. You aren't prepared for the shock you will get from seeing one of these multidimensional intelligences. But if you do see it and you go through it, it's an initiation of sorts that it starts to flood in more and you're prepared for more. But I wouldn't say that these things are so much supernatural. That's a term I think gets thrown around too much. And the reason I'll say that is that something supernatural is something that exists that is not natural. I do believe these things exist within the laws of our universe. And I would say they are more correctly defined as preternatural.
Well put. Yeah, it's definitely full in nature, nature, which is a word for God, from of God in the vocabulary. And it's just rarer. And also, there are interesting survival mechanisms on people's perception, as what we've known from quantum physics of observation, and what the ego isn't always ready for what to observe, and the limiter and blinders on our perception, and being able to just see 0.0000, a bunch of zeros, outrageous amount of zeros, 5 whatever percent of all the energy and existence in any given space, because a lot of things are layered on top of each other. So all these realities and consciousness and realms and dimensions overlaid on top of each other that we can't even interact with in our hologram as a safety mechanism. And as the original purpose for the veils, which is to be a quarantining effect for safety, similar to the body, the cells, and everything fractally going up and down, creating a space and boundaries so that they can flourish and grow, so that they're not intruded upon by shadow or evil or entanglement or harm. And then they get to the point where they're ready, and then veils come down. And then we see and perceive more. And when we're open and we're looking for those things, we tend to see more things. And those things don't necessarily always want to be seen, and they're in those points of non-observation.
Yeah, so I think it's absolutely fascinating that if you look at our reality, just like you said, in particle physics and cosmology, we have these things called Planck units. You've heard of Planck units of time, right? So we measure that through the Planck constant. And so by looking at these, we come up with something called the cubic center of reality, which is currently 10 to the minus 45 nanometers. And that's based on the Planck constant. But the actual is 10 to the minus 34. And really, I do believe that is going to change in time. We are going to have a whole new understanding of things. But I don't know where you disappeared to, but I'm sure you'll be back in a moment. He must be having some sort of connection difficulties. But going back to what we were saying, what's really fascinating about all of us is that if you look in your scriptures, go back into about Genesis 6:4, and you find out that these creator gods, these Elohim, we could call them, that they were looking at the folks that they had created. And maybe you might say that this came from the Sumerian Enuma Elish and these tablets of creation. But in Genesis 6:4, they're looking at this new hominid that they created, and they said, well, it's time that we continue our zoological experiment. And I've told you guys many times before that I think that the greatest example of this in Hollywood has been the movie John Carter of Mars, where you see those folks, the Burns, those folks that are monitoring the progress of a civilization from behind the scenes, and they're taking for them sort of a loosh. Same with Elysium. You're seeing a very advanced group that's monitoring them. The same thing is happening with us. So think about this. Due to the photoreceptors in your eyes, they're limited to 390 to 750 nanometers. And that's like a billionth of a meter. So the amount of light that we take in is very limited. Our perceptions are limited to the realities that exist all around us, that all of you are a part of. And this is rather fascinating to think of, that if we're in a certain density, a form of denser subatomic particles, this reality that we exist in, welcome back, Sean, that you also have dimensions that exist around us that we are coexisting in. And the best way to describe this is that people always like to throw around the word dimension. But truth be told, in your room right now, there's many dimensions. You could walk from one side of the room to the other and you're another dimension. So these realities that we're starting to understand, it's a rather incredible realization to have, but we are making scientific breakthroughs in this area, and you all can look this up. I always tell people, don't take my word for anything. I say, don't take my word as the gospel truth. Go research this for yourself. So what you can research is that there have been studies done in nanoparticles. Nanoparticles have been a great part of the debate we've had the last few years, with all kinds of people discussing them and debating them. And they are at the forefronts of all kinds of medicine and transhumanism and all that stuff. But nanoparticles are silicon hexagonal structures that are about 1 atom thick. And they can work on the geosynchronistic orbits of the body. There's all kinds of different things that we use them for. But currently, there have been studies that have gone far ahead, where we've taken mice and we've injected the eyeballs of mice with nanoparticles so that they could see into the infrared. They've also worked on the ultraviolet. Now, mind you, this has been perfected now to just eye drops that they can use. Think about where this would be useful if certain leaders were meeting in our world once a year in a Davos-like situation to perceive multidimensional intelligences. I mean, these have also been used in classified technologies for the lungs, so people could breathe longer underwater in certain military applications. But the point being is that our science is so close to that edge of what we used to call the talk of quacks and charlatans yesterday. All the stuff about multiverses and dimensions is our mainstream science now, which is amazing. Sean, do we have you back?
Thanks for holding the stream. Got some things messing with me. Okay, so we're good though. Thank you for going into that, and that's a fascinating topic on increasing perception. I also look to go towards that area as it opens so many doors. I find at least both with the physical eye or in the third eye. Third eye is a little easier to initiate activation on its own, but there are parts of the brain that have control mechanisms and internal control rooms that you can vision quest into to activate things that are operating systems in the body to increase functionality. So increasing the perception is not out of the range of when we take more control over things. And like what you said, nanoparticles, that can be done. So also to go off the topic that I heard, and I can't really comment on everything you said then, but before.
Well, what you missed is I was talking about the cubic center of reality in its relation to the Planck constant, and that how the photoreceptors in our eyes were limited to about 390 to 750 nanometers, a billionth of a meter in what we're perceiving. And when we move beyond that, we're seeing that our faculties of perception are being stretched. But with that, you were also mentioning the third eye as you were kind of cutting out. And I think that talk right there is very, very important. The importance of the pineal gland and the bioelectrical fields of the body. The ancients truly realized the way to unlock it. And I'm going to tell everybody right now that that's one of the greatest keys that there are. When you go to the Vatican and you visit the Vatican courtyard, just in front of the Vatican's museum area of the Egyptian wing of the museum, there's something called the Fontana della Pigna, or the Fountain of the Pine Cone. And it is a portrayal of the pineal gland. And across from it, you'll see some other fascinating depictions that we could get into as well. But next to it, on either side, are the peacocks, which also are related to immortality and the Indian mysteries, but they're also related to the ibis bird in how we look at this in its depiction of, behind it, there is an open sarcophagus. So it's talking about that with this open sarcophagus is almost a way to cheat death there. It's talking about there's a key. The key that the key to other dimensions is in the gates of the heart. So when we look at this, one thing in the mysteries that's really interesting is that whenever you see two serpents or two phoenixes or two eagles, such as you see on the 32nd or 33rd degree of Freemasonry in the Scottish Rite, you see something. If the heads of either the serpents or the birds are facing each other, they're seeking immortality. If they're faced away from each other, like on a cartouche or in that symbolism, it means they have reached it. And there's a reason for that, because there was in our legends, like if we go back to the Jewish Midrash version of Genesis, it says that there was an Adamic race, like ADM, where there was two heads that were facing in both directions, and they had both sexes in the body that were able to regenerate themselves. Or you look at the month of January, named after the god Janus, which is from where we get janitor, the keeper of the keys. It's looking from the year that just passed or the year that's ahead. There was a thought of this immortal realization. And what's fascinating about this is that even if you look in the Bible again, Matthew 6:22, it says, when the single eye is open, the body shall be full of light. Have you ever read that one before? So how important is the pineal gland into psychic exploration, Sean?
Well, it's big. Okay, so from what I know, it's one of the initiating points in the body. Both can be initiated through percentages of what the functions of the heart do with the breath and the blood, which then pumps a certain amount of pressure to the third and the fourth ventricle, which cause pressure to the pineal gland, which the pineal gland has piezoelectric crystals in it that also it has the function of an antenna that allows to perceive different frequencies. There's also I would say 50% the heart, 40% the third eye, 10% the soul is involved in a process kind of like a car turning on the right key and the ignition and everything. If you want to initiate your own bodily functional psychedelic trip without drugs, which can be initiated and people have done before, and I've found that they can, and especially if they have the right practice, such as through breath work, focus, motion, will, intention, and a lot of other mechanisms that are being processed and see what's the most success in shareability. There are different functions based on how many blocks a person's going through and if they're ready to, but there's a pathway to get ready for that, as well as a safe method and a non-safe method of doing it. And then also, people can just take psychedelics if they want, but that's also a gamble based on what they'll face. And it's like it can be a really nice, beautiful experience, or it can be a challenge, which is to like face your internal self or an external attachment, and then overcome it, like facing the dark dragon as the knight, and then get to the treasure chest behind it, which is empowerment. Like a roller coaster takes you down and then back up. But a lot of people don't always overcome it. But it has a time limit. So even if they don't overcome it, they come back at least most of the time if they don't go insane, like if some demon goes through it, which is unfortunate and happens if the different avenues of yourself, the people around you, the environment, and the drug itself have incursion on them through haunted entanglements. But then even with that, every challenge can be overcome if you reach deep inside yourself and pull out that a power that the universe grants you to overcome any challenge that you are then facing, because it likes to be smart like that. There are other interesting methods that can be done safely, such as doing slowly releasing veils one at a time in perception, in vision questing and going inward in meditation, which is a very safe method where you can start to open up, detach from the external environment, go inward, and detach from all other sensory, like sensory deprivation does. But if you can know how that works in attachment, you can do it more easily, and then get to where your heart sensing is like one eye and it feels the entire room. And you can, I've even seen this on in dreams and lucid dreaming as the state before getting up, and in ayahuasca trips where I could see the entire room with my eyes closed, with my heart, and also see beyond that with what else is in the room. And then it goes into other realities and realms. And then the multidimensional body tech that I apply the meaning to with each different drug. It's like a shift, or like those t-shirts with Pink Floyd pyramid where the light goes through it. Different way to perceive reality and light passes through and interpreted by the brain. And each is a different key, and can allow you to see into the realm that that drug initiates beings into being able to perceive. It could be a dimension or realm or whatever. And those places are variety, because each mushroom does a different place, and same thing with every other drug. So depending on the environment, micro, macro, that could be a very loving, beautiful place, or it could be like something that if you've just found a secret room in your house and it hasn't been cleaned in centuries, and there's spiders and cobwebs and it's a little dark and you're scared to go in it. And then it's asking you to be a caretaker for that environment and be able to bring it out of that nightmare into the daydream. And then that is a test to tell if you're in the varying levels of shamanism, able to help protect people as they shift their reality from negative states to positive ones if they face those big things.
Yeah, very well said. You know, it's a very interesting topic to bring up these various sacraments and plant medicines and their relation to these experiences. But when you look at our eyes, let's say you look at the photoreceptors, the rods and cones in our eyes, and then when we look at the optic nerve, our optic nerve is upside down. So as Daniel Brinkley always says, to quote my very good friend, he always says that it just shows you that the divine has a sense of humor when she made us that day, he always says, to finish the joke. But then it goes up into two visual cortices, and it's really a brain of its own, which is fascinating. But looking into this idea of the pineal gland and its importance, the idea that it was linked as a very important part of the mysteries is an understatement. I mean, a lot of the human body has been written about in the mysteries where the actual is hidden in the literal. For example, when we see the mentioning of a pine cone, that's why it's on top of the pontiff's staff. It's also connected to the Bacchanalian mysteries for Bacchus. It also has various connections when we look over into the pituitary gland, or we look at the Orphic egg. We see all sorts of various ways of decoding the mysteries through our body. Even the story of the murder of Cain, with the murder of in the story of Cain and Abel, that is an area when we look at Cain and Abel, that's a story about our equilibrium. And we see that how the balance is set off, which is fascinating. And Manly Palmer Hall has covered that a lot also, looking at the human body. But many have said that this idea of DMT or dimethyltryptamine and that it is created within our pineal gland. I believe the most modern author to talk about that was Dr. Rick Strassman, where he talked about that in the spirit molecule. And up until a little while ago, that was being disputed, but they did find that there was DMT being created in the pineal gland of rats. And again, everybody, if you don't already know, pineal gland, pine cone sort of gland, there's a connection there in its shape and symbolism and everything else. Now, when we look back at our various secret societies, they were all using various sorts of plant medicines and nightshades and herbs, even cannabis, hashish. All of these things go even back into the spiritualist movement. And a friend of mine who is a Canadian author, he wrote Libre 420. His name is Chris Bennett. He covered this a lot also. And of course, P.D. Newman, he's talked about this a lot with his new work on theurgy and his other work, looking at how the Masonic order is connected to the acacia. And the acacia, of course, is one of the constituents that we would get over within ayahuasca, for example. We start to see that there is this connection to DMT and opening up to the mysteries. But I would also swing back around over to what you said about mushrooms. Mushrooms are fascinating. The very fact that within these various proteins and where we find them, that they could exist, well, their spores could exist anyways, as Terence McKenna hypothesized, they could exist and come from outer space. I truly believe that just like the octopus, I believe that they could have come from, billions of light years away. They could have come from various galaxies. They're absolute breadcrumbs that have helped people come back to another place in consciousness or helped them to have an introspective journey. There's also another thing that the ancients were tapping into, which was alchemy. Now, through alchemy, as to go back into what people traditionally thought, a lot of people have just thought, well, alchemy is just about turning base metals or turning lead into gold. Well, alchemy has so many different uses. The word for Egypt, the ancient name for Egypt was chem, where we get chemistry and alchemy from. They were literally creating this type of manna or white gold, the same manna that we get from the Moses story in the Bible, and they were eating it, and it was giving them certain abilities. And they had other precursors and liquids that the priestcrafts were using, and we find that all over in certain reliefs that we see that there was definitely an understanding of chemistry. There was definitely an understanding of the spiritual belief that they could enter through doorways. They could go to other places. They could access what we call stargates. And I believe the key there was they had a way of opening the pineal gland very quickly and changing the bioelectrical fields in the body. Now, I believe a lot of what people have today on the internet that they sell as this substance, so they'll call it different names. They'll call it monoatomic gold. They'll call it orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, or they'll call it oramus. And oramus, for the most part, these are just various minerals that they'll have and they'll extract it. I'm not saying that those don't have benefits. And some of them you have to be very careful, the ones you get on the internet, because it'll clog your kidneys up. But I believe the ancient Egyptians, the forms of it that they had the right protons, electrons, and neutrons in the right sequence. They had a means of doing something to the body that unlocked very ancient secrets for them. And they started to discover this around the fourth dynasty. For the dynastic Egyptians, they rediscovered it, we should say. And right around that time, everything they were doing shot up to the roof. All their discoveries of wherever they were learning that again and where they were getting their knowledge and information from. And to the ancient Egyptians, when they would go to these various places and learn, they would call this the duat, or the underworld. To the Babylonians and those folks, they called it the plain of Sharon. So there's always been mentionings from our ancient peoples of portals, doorways, other dimensions, beings, and ways that they had to access these things. And I don't think that's any different than what we get from these Peruvian shamans and those in the Amazon that talk about drinking ayahuasca, right?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, every culture seems to have a remnants of an ancient society that goes back to pre-knowledge of pre-civilizations, and Egypt inheriting it, as we can tell, with it being at its peak of its civilization at the beginning and then it rapidly declining, and then all this technology being lost, which and hypothesized that they inherited it from an old civilization, and that also could have had interaction with other planets. And then where all this knowledge comes from, and the secrets of bringing out of the black hole of Chem, the black land, the ways to bring out elementals from the void and bring more matter out, which I have been able to figure out is possible with things like the fourth state of water, as well as the alchemical process of making ormus, as well as other high spin rate, high energetic states of single atoms. And I make it myself, and I'll probably eventually be.
That's the key. And that's where Aleister Crowley screwed up. Crowley, I want to put this out there that, okay, Crowley definitely, he's a very questionable figure, very questionable figure when we look back at our history. He definitely had some strange ideas about the world, but he was taking things very literally. When you are looking at the alchemical process, the formulas that we see, like let's say you take ash, which is very interesting because in the Moses story, for example, we find a burning bush. So we could take the ash from that. We take the ash from nature, we start to stir it around, and it's very similar to, like, let's say if someone's making DMT and you're using lye, you have to use, you get to the right pH.
Yeah.
That exactly. Well, the interesting thing is, to the Egyptians, they were able to take the tamarisk, and the tamarisk, which is the thorny plant, which is the same one Jesus wore around his head. They were able to use that to create sort of a hydrofluoric acid. And they could use it for a variety of things, but through that, there they are being able to do these extractions. And the thing that's really fascinating is that there are groups today that definitely incorporate alchemy into their spiritual practices. Like, we're talking high-level practices. The folks on the internet that try to speculate about secret societies, they only throw around a few names. Their favorite name is the Illuminati, and that name really hasn't been used since May 1st, 1776, with Adam Weishaupt. And Adam Weishaupt, that was part of the Bavarian Illuminati. He originally wanted to call them, they originally wanted to call it the beekeepers, by the way, because all the early Egyptian kings were called beekeepers. So were when you go back into the Babylonian, the Sumerian, there's a very interesting connection there. Even the bee is sacred to masonry. But some hidden fraternities in the world possess great, let's just say, psychic or spiritual knowledge, and there are means of opening up certain doors and sort of a cheat or a workaround to the limitation that's been put on our perceptive faculties. And let's say you're going over to Karnak Temple in Egypt, which was called Thebes as well, the city of gates. At Karnak Temple, one of the guys that was a master of stargates and ancient knowledge was Tutmosis III. And Tutmosis III was also the founder of the Great White Brotherhood, which he had his office over there in Karnak, but this was, written about extensively in Alexandria. If you go over to the Annals of the King, which is his treasury, you'll see these cakes. You'll see the white cakes, or the white hedge, or the white shite, as it's called. Some people have incorrectly called this substance mufkuts, but the reason it was called mufkuts, even Sir Lawrence Gardner wrote that in Lost Secrets of the Sacred Ark, is because mufkuts just means turquoise, and there was a lot of this found. It's a long story, but there's a lot of this found in an area that had turquoise. But more correctly, it was actually literally called like white cakes, and you find it in the treasury where all the gold is and everything, that these folks were eating this stuff. It was also used in certain boxes, like to act as a capacitor, in all likelihood in the Great Pyramid. So it was like a Tesla Wardenclyffe tower, so that it could generate energy, so that you had it not only as a means that they were consuming it, but it was also being put in the Ark of the Covenant devices. And there, by the way, the Ark of the Covenant is not just a Hebrew story. It is an Egyptian story mentioned on many, many different temples. And point of fact, there would have been thousands of these arks. And if you think about why that's so profound, that they had this substance in there, and we won't go into the particulars today about why this substance is so special. It has these bioelectrical aspects and everything. But the fascinating thing is that if you can fit pure photonic energy with no mass inside of a box, you have one of the most powerful weapons on Earth, which is really amazing. Um, Looking further into this, though, the thing is that on that wall of the Annals of the King for Tutmosis III that we find at Karnak, there's also these vials that look like almost like you would see like beakers in a lab. There's different vials that the priests were using, and when you see the liquids that that were used to make this, they had various colors that they would change, and this is why I brought up Crowley. Is that Crowley being a literalist? He would look at these various liquids as the color was changing when you're stirring and you're making this formula for the monoatomic gold, or you're making this white gold, and he would see it changing various colors. Like for one, he would see it changing red, and so he'd say, "Oh, hey, that's people should be drinking blood," or he'd see a color that would change like urine. And the European alchemists who got all their alchemical secrets from the Arabs, who called it alchemia when they brought it out of there, and then it was brought over to all the alchemists in Europe, like Nicholas Flamel and all those folks. They all had their alchemy books and ways that they were trying to make this. Some of them were confused because they said there's one that looks like it's like excrement. So Crowley, being like a literalist, he's thinking, oh, well, maybe it means we need to eat excrement, or we eat, drink urine or blood or whatever. That's part of the formula. No, these are the transformative colors and properties it takes in the alchemical formula when it's being made. And then when you finally see this being made, it's rather amazing when all the particles fall down into a cake-like formation. Now, what's fascinating about this is that there are other alchemical formulas that hold various means to do things. Like one of them is called the red lion. Have you ever heard of the red lion? It's like a red liquid, and these are some of them that were shown on the walls that they were using even in the Egyptian priestcraft. Now, this I'll give an example because we're not talking psychedelics right now, but I will give a psychedelic comparison. When people talk about taking DMT or 5-methoxynyl DMT, like 5-MeO DMT, you have different variants where you might have something that's more visual, where you're going to have a breakthrough and go through to the other side. Then something might be more auditorial and sensory like. And just like as you said within the various types of mushrooms, in what the psilocybin and psilocin, if you go into the various types of cubensis in the Mexican mushroom family and you break it down and you look over at, let's say, the Cambodian mushroom is not going to be as visual in its component, but more of a feeling and empathogenic sort of aspect to it. But in the mysteries, they had these capabilities of overriding, like hitting an override switch on our psychic limitations. And I think in the East, in the Eastern principles and disciplines like Buddhism and especially the original types of Buddhism, which were more mystical, like when you go to Mahayana Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, the later pragmatic forms of Buddhism that trickled out down into Myanmar, Burma, Korea, China. China was more of a philosophical Buddhism, but the original kind that were chased out of India and that fled up into Tibet, they had these means of unlocking these things through meditation and whatnot. So my question for you is, do you think that it is better for somebody to speed up their development or to use these workarounds, or should someone find a middle way of a balance, or should they abstain from all of these things and just do it through the means of meditation?
Good question. It's a range of slow and safe versus fast and dangerous. So with speeding up, there comes dangerous. It's high risk, high reward, and that's mostly if you succeed, which is not guaranteed. And it's based on how ready you are for those things. And if you have prep work and where there's barely any teachers or help, then it's more successful. With using psychotropic drugs, I'd say that you have to do a lot. You have to do prep work. You have to be honoring of the spirit and the plant medicine or whatever. You have to make the environment good. You have to be in the right place, right?
Set and setting, right?
Have a lot of things around you to support you if it goes bad, and things to empower you and remind you so that you can external and inward. a lot of people fail in this, and then they let it, when they face the darkness, it can mess up their life quite a bit. So I wouldn't like I don't recommend it like as a place of safety, and I don't want to get sued. But if you're gonna do that kind of thing, I'd recommend being prepared, and the more abilities that you have, the more you can do. And when you're put into the arena, so to speak, of that, then you can learn quickly on your feet too, which I did. So I grew very, very quickly. So I'm glad I did it, but also some of the negative experiences I would not recommend or suggest or wish on even my worst enemy. So it's for the brave. There are also, with the rewards, if you don't go inward and learn a lot, it can be like a bleeding wound that continues and makes it so other things can come through, and so you gotta become a healer essentially of yourself if things go awry. But there are environments that can hold space for like doing it in daytime, out in nature, not being around technology or things that if you feel into them, you entangle with a whole structure of negativity that can overtake the reality. Recommend them. Doing that with that, and then having a playlist off Wi-Fi and of music that's supportive, and senses, both smell, taste, touch, feel around you that are supportive. And there are crazy abilities you can manifest through these trips and journeys and vision quests. So there are benefits to it, but it is for the brave. There is multiple mystery schools around the planet for it today, as well as in the ancient days, because with lack of knowledge, it is a key that can open the door to bring people to empowerment that can change the world greatly. So it's a benefit. So, but it can be a detriment. So, it's like a shaman. You got to surround yourself with all these different tools and abilities so that you're prepared for what could be shown to you, which is like the tearing of the veil, and then something it might not be ready for. Something that makes it so it's safer for people. A lot of times, what they want to show you is to let go of things. Or in the art of enlightenment in Hinduism and Buddhism, detachment, which is your greatest, most powerful version of you, and the power deep within to overcome anything is deep within you. And you're letting go of a lot of things, limits, attachment, fear, overwhelm, wounds, your shadow self, and sometimes you're integrating it fully into yourself with shadow work and bringing that dark part of yourself to light. And then if it's you're just in a bad environment and things are targeting you, and it's, oh, that's not actually me, and that's some demon or something, then it would be teaching you a self-defense principles and how to overcome. And then through the combat scenario, it initiates you into being able to generate the force and energy to be able to defend and protect your reality, which people are allowed to do in the defensive principle. Do no harm in the divine feminine. Do take no shit. You're allowed to defend yourself, and it doesn't cause you karma if you put enough effort and energy that to stop that being from incurring on your reality.
That's a very fascinating perspective and some very good points that you make there. Set and setting is always absolutely very important when these various sacraments come into play. And there is all sorts of these various psychotropic sort of substances from plants, herbs, trees, bark, leaves. I mean, not only in every part of the continent, but even in the areas where you are in Mexico, we know there's stuff like Salvia divinorum, the Mexican mint, that has all kinds of strange effects to it. All the various countless types of mushrooms. There is something called the god bean, Mucuna pruriens, which creates dopamine and serotonin. There's Scaledium tortuoso. There's that creates, it's like a natural SSRI. There is Cava Cava, Piper Mysteria. There is, the list is endless. And people don't realize how far these things go back. A lot of Americans talk about something called kratom in their news. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's called Mitragyna speciosa. It's named after a bishop's mitre, the precious mitre. That got its name from Peter Corthals of the Dutch East India Company. And he went over to Thailand and saw that the workers were working far harder than they were on, let's say, marijuana. But people don't realize is that goes back to the Indian holy books of the Vedas, where it was called Kademba. And it was connected over to Buddhism. It was connected over into ancient Egypt and used in Hathor's wine. There were all types of uses for it, not only in a spiritual setting, but of course in many other different physiological, biological needs. But again, I think we have to respect all these things because they lead us back to our inward reflexivities, our inward perceptions. And one of those things that I think is very important to look at is prayer, or meditation more correctly. I believe that the original form of prayer was meditation. And this is particularly important because I think that while there are a lot of beautiful and sanctimonious sounding prayers, and people rehearse prayers, and in fact, when they rehearse prayers, prayer has been proven to be a powerful psychological point of integration for various experiences that we might have, that even when we look at the Lord's Prayer, which is very famous, there are all kinds of keys within there, even Kabbalistic keys. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. In the Hebrew, it's Ato Malkuth Vugabora Vugadola Leolam. Amen. Well, however, that prayer actually comes back from the Papyrus of Ani. It's an ancient Egyptian prayer. Our Father Amun, who art in heaven. It's basically, these ancient prayers and techniques go back to the mystery schools. They go back into the teachings of where we're drawing this energy from and who we are and our ability to manifest, create, manipulate reality in our own way. And sometimes the sounds that we utter and enunciate are very important because we do live in a universe that is composed like a symphony, an intelligent symphony of these parasynthetic harmonies. And we see that in the laws of harmonics that Pythagoras talked about. We see that within, why do you think the Buddhists have chants? Churches have hymns. People are always intoning and toning certain names for their vibratory qualities. Look at the vibration and frequency that Tesla talked about. But I would say one of the most interesting things we found out with prayer is there was a Catholic doctor, and his name was Dr. Boguslaw. Kind of an interesting sounding name. I don't know if I'd want to hire him as a lawyer, but maybe he's a good doctor. Boguslaw. You can look this up, everybody. He used something called an electroscope, where he took people that were being prayed over in hospitals into other situations, and he was seeing who recovered faster based on who was prayed over. And the people who were prayed over actually recovered faster, as well as he was able to measure various means of electromagnetic fields in the room. That brings us to another subject. I noticed that you are lighting some sort of an incense there. Is that incense? What is that? What kind of incense is that you're?
And then also, I got Palo Santo and different things that I combine together as a herb. Banishing, it's mostly for protection and offense.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. If you look at the Native American traditions, I mean, people wonder why I always have various cigars with me. I always have them in my pocket because the tobacco has been used for a very long time. And I've had folks, this is going to sound strange, but I've had folks that are involved with the unacknowledged or special access programs tell me that some of these reptoid types of beings that people hear about and our friend David Icke likes to talk about say that they have an aversion to it. They don't like the smell of cigars or tobacco. So I always have 2 or 3 around me. I always keep cohibas near me because I have had some very interesting encounters myself with various beings in the dimensional ecology of things. However, from what I've been told in the past, that Palo Santo removes only the negative energy in the room, whereas the sage will just do a sweep of everything. And of course, we've used cedar, but it's interesting, the Buddhists, and in their temples, they'll use sandalwood. And then we go more traditionally into our temples in the Middle East and other places, we'll use frankincense, we'll use myrrh. We change the frequency of the room. We start to change the resonance of it. There is a very, very cleansing principle to that. And what most people don't realize, I don't think, is how vast our dimensional ecology is. If you walk down the street, you see one person, you know that you can just multiply that. There's about 7,000 people. You can multiply that by about 7,000 energies or entities around you. There was a guy named Jose Escamillo years ago that talked about these things called rods that would come to the area. He's now passed away, but you could photograph them. And there's various astral wildlife and intelligences that are all around us, and things that will harbor in a quarter or take up home in a certain area and either absorb or feed off of energies. And I think what's just one of the most interesting things is that people that perceive these beings and entities and things like that of that nature, I've noticed that over the years, a lot of people would report that they saw them in their home. Let's say if you want to talk about a discarnate or a ghost, a spirit, those type of beings, that they would see it either over their bed or in an area by a shower. And I believe that because we spend so much time in our bed, we charge it up with our energy, our electromagnetic energy. And the same is true of water, like a water source or by a shower. What has your experience been with perceiving these sorts of beings?
A lot. Had a lot of ways that my perception opened up through various events and visitations, and my empathic ability being turned on high, and being able to feel things super deeply. And then all these elemental and bodies that connect to different dimensional aspects, and then me reading into each, getting attacked like a lot and things trying to kill me. And then getting psychic tracking, and then perception into translation of what the energy frequency of entanglement is, and then seeing and daydreaming it, and being okay even if it goes into a fear kind of like situal vision, which is what people have to face if they want to increase their vision in a safe way. You have to face their fears, which are in the subconscious of things in a list that the higher self is giving them that they're ready to face, and usually things that everyone on the planet has entangled, usually with them, and at least in different points in time of psychic parasites, or the same word is applied. That's just the colloquial term for like etheric parasites or energy parasites, or
Oh yeah.
astral demons, entities, multidimensional apex predators, and going into an energy harvesting system, and their different hierarchies and where they come from, their mythos, and residual images that they use, if they're just in one layer of reality, such as the astral, if they're dream energy harvesting beings, or if they're in an elemental dimension like fire or void space, which each one of those things our body can be opened up to, and then we become a management for. We have the ability to emit that type of energy, or at least a positive version of it, to interact with that state and build with that our protective fortress, our protection layers, and then start to caretake that layer of reality as we shift through our environment and move and travel, which is what we're supposed to be doing as caretakers for Earth. But we're coming out of a stupor and amnesia, so it's understandable. And then those that partake in this field and shamanism and face these things, and as they get more targeted, because the people that are targeted have things of value that these beings want, and we stop letting the reality tell us, oh, things just happen, it is what it is, oh, people just get sick and die, or illness or pain comes out of nowhere. We start figuring out why and the causation. A lot of these things go to a consciousness effect that's separate and external than your internal sovereign free will programming. It's like, I don't want to be ill. I don't want to be in pain. There's like reasons and causations for things besides just toxins and parasites internally that's physical, and as well as uh, viruses and bacteria and whatever else uh, for why pain exists. And there's a lot of people that go to the hospital and they're like, why do I am I experiencing this? And like, you're totally fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You must be making it up in your mind. And then they come home and they're like, what? And so then they come to me or other healers or people that can take care of it and see into these worlds and then do a cause and effect to resolve, which is also, as they observe that, initiation into them starting that pathway as well, which is to figure out why are there beings out there that are demonic or which are fractured composite beings of stolen parts. It's like a ghost that has been in the astral for a long time and they forgot how to create love and light, so they have to take energy from the environment and others to keep themselves going, and they can't pass on because they're limited from where they can go. They end up choosing to stay there or then breach into other places. I know that people that are Christians, when I ask them what are demons, they think that they're the remnants of the dead giants and Nephilim. After they died, they become demons. But I would agree with that. But there's also older things that people box into a type of species.
Yes.
And they can be of any species. And then of course it comes from the old word daemon, which is helpful spirit, but then it divided it into like light and dark with angels and other stuff. So we need a category for dark beings, so that's fine.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, traditionally in the occult, we've had various writings and books people have had, like on the Goetia, and there's more modernly, but they're out of print. There's a book by Fred Gettings. It's called The Dictionary of Demons, and The Dictionary of Angels by Gustav Davidson also have a list of beings in there. And I think demon is really colloquial slang for these ancient multidimensional intelligences that have been here a very long time, that have taken up a home and are running around behind the scenes. They feed off the loosh of humanity. They manipulate scenarios. They do exist. And by the way, I want to say that parasites that you mentioned, it's a very good thing you mentioned that. Shout out to my friend Julia Kamen, who's made some great videos about cleansing parasites. Parasites can actually stop you from perceiving so much psychically. They can also take up a host in your intestines and be difficult to get rid of in their own right. Where you live, you could get ivermectin very easily, but there's lots of means that people can get, not only pharmacologically, but through natural means that they could start cleansing these out. However, what's an interesting observation is that 98 to 99% of all life exists as nanobacteria. And this is really interesting if you think about this, because when you think about how much bacteria is living on you right now that oscillates with you, you have lots of it, like 5 or 6 kilos at least, and it oscillates with your bad habits, your food, your energy, whatever it works. You think about that, you have about 7 or 8,000 energetic parasitic life forms living off of you. And these can be picked up from a variety of ways. Let's say a person is engaging in negative activities or negative thinking. They're spending time around a lot of low energy places. Let's say a lot of those old slummy bars where everyone's moping around, and they're taking in a lot of spirits, and spirits go with spirits, as you know. But I think that there are disorders that we might find, concurrent disorders, and this is a bold statement to make that might offend some people, but if you look at what psychologists use to diagnose people, they use something called the Diagnostic Service Manual. And so I think, they'll look at something like the DSM-5 and they'll look up a disorder in there. And I think that there are certain disorders that people might be diagnosed with that could be from an unhealthy energetic body, where there could be holes in, for lack of better terms, holes in the aura that could be played upon, and these energetic intrusions. However, there is a direct correlation with the health of the body and the energetic influxions and interactions. And sometimes this could be why a person might have a great imbalance by what they're seeing or perceiving. And sometimes we say, oh, this person's delusional, or they have some sort of problem with it, but maybe they really are seeing something that is of a otherworldly nature.
Thank you for bringing that up, and not thank you for the boldness. And I agree, it's a lot of people are afraid to talk about that subject, and I'm not. Assholes, killed people I love through malpractice in medicine, and so I really am pissed off at how our medical establishment exists right now, and to where it seems like just making money off of people, and then kind of extending their life, but also putting a bunch of symptoms in them. It's really annoying. So I have a grudge against that. So, but I try to heal and forgive, because it's mostly people that don't know, but then it's like being used. It's understandable. Whatever. A lot of illnesses, when you go to the core of things, and negative conditions are absolutely caused at a higher level than just physical, chemical, or malfunctions. A lot of things are caused by like deeper layers such as inflammation, parasites, toxins, and then going even deeper to how that got there, which is a breach of your own sovereign bubble of reality. In some way, either taking it internally, breathing, all the other ways. And then as well as energetically, because then physical to emotional, how well you're doing, and how energy and motion interacts besides chemicals and hormone glands, and which is just a way of perceiving greater functionality of perception, because the emotional body allows people to sense and translate information, energy, and motion, which has data behind it, which then leads to the knowingness ability. But and every emotion has a purpose and what it's there, and you can like read into it. And then going even higher in the mental state, and how our mind and consciousness observes and interacts, and our belief pattern, which can based on negative beliefs, can be parasitic into themselves, as well as put us down a detrimental route, and then create a whole bunch of negative emotions that then build up in intensity and compression in our organs that cause disease. And then even a layer above that is spiritual, which is intention. Is it our intention that we're fucking over our life with all these things we're bringing in, or is it other things bringing into our life, whether they have a body or not have a body? And then the intention of locomotion of mind to emotion to physical ailment and intention, which there's many demons in demonology that go towards illness or dysfunctions, death, pain, and many other negative states of reality that we are thrust into this realm, in this world, to overcome and transcend by understanding them, and then with that knowing the opposite, which is the state to become in, and then stabilize and maintain ourselves.
I like what you said there. I personally have always frowned upon looking at these various multidimensional intelligences as demons. I don't even like the term demon, much like you said. The definition that's usually used by religious folks, and even others that kind of smirk at it and they don't understand what it really is. These intelligences that are cohabitating with us, that they're all around us, they are very real. And if you really want to seek out some of these experiences, you will have them. There are many different means to perceive otherworldly things. And there are other intelligences and beings, and I believe that there is a differentiation by what we call the spirit realm and the spirit side, where the suffering, attachments, and the what we'll call evil, which is another form of ignorance. I believe that these things are all subject to these denser areas that we are, and these densities that are surrounded by dimensions. So there should be a differentiation between the two of them. But I would say that, if anything, that we should strive to not only look for our greater potential within ourselves, because I believe the human potential is very great, but we should look to raise our vibration. We should look to become spiritual warriors. And by learning about the higher faculties of perception that we all have and the incredible energetic bodies we have, not only from the electromagnetic energy sources that we call chakras, which there isn't just 7 of them. And I'll tell you, a lot of people think that we just have 7 chakras, from the root chakra, you got solar plexus, the spleen, the heart, the throat, the crown, or the third eye, the crown. You have chakras all through your body, the tips of your fingers, at the back of your knees. You have them at your elbows all the way up, and you can brush these energetic areas up, move them around, and change them. There's all kinds of things that take place in the body with the various practices like Tantra and Kundalini and amazing things that people have learned in Qigong and various energy practices. But it's very interesting that when the Buddha was dying, the Buddha had known about the stories that come back from the yogis and those of the practices of India about these chakras. And when he was dying and he was surrounded by his bodhisattvas, we read in the Dharmapada, or which is the last great discourse, the story at the end of the Buddha's life, that when his body was dying and it was becoming weak and could no longer support him, we see his head resting like this. Have you ever seen that in Thailand, like a Buddha that's like this? That is the portrayal that we see from the last great discourse. That when the Buddha was like this, he was feeling the inferior was becoming the superior, and he was feeling his energy move along the vagus, or what used to be called the pneumogastric nerve. And he was mapping it out, and he was telling the bodhisattvas what it felt like as this was happening to him. So when you become aware of these things, your energy body, you really start to see that there is this connectivity between all of us, and that is where we tend to appreciate the principles of love, tolerance, kindness, compassion, showing generosity for each other without expecting anything in return, as well as that we should attempt to do no harm. And when we say attempt, it's because even if we want to try our best, sometimes we're going to harm ourselves regardless. But most of all, what I think is very exciting about what you teach, Sean, and what inspired me to come on your show, inspired me about talking to you and all of the work that you've done, is that we should all look to become spiritual warriors, which I think is a very important role for all of us.
Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for going in the pathway to show people to do no harm in trying. In my further understanding of natural law, I've been able to make it so that
Yes.
I understand what causes karma, and which is drama, entanglement, and being in the right of situations where you do no harm to where, because everything is you, so you're ultimately hurting yourself, and then it fractals back, and then it hurts you. So like kind of stupid. And then so why do it at all? So I don't like to harm anyone, and even the ones that harm me. In the beginning, I did do combat.
But you did say take no shit, which I also think is important.
Take no shit is important, and I make it. I make this clear because I have people that misunderstand me, and they also forget that I understand moral law very strongly, to where they'll accuse me of things, and I don't. And it sucks when you're a magician, and it's like you're not really wanting to cause harm, because like, oh, that's a dark sorcerer, and they're fucking stealing, and it's an. And I understand that people need to do that, because there are people like that are causing harm, that don't want to know moral code and natural law, and understand that you are everything. And it's really not okay, and it's kind of unuseful to even steal from beings, because you're putting more blocks on yourself that make it so that you can't generate energy yourself. I like to help people understand the method where they can generate the power they want themselves internally, and they don't have to rely on external things, and or anyone in general. And the more safe you feel, the more detached from all these external things of negative systems is the boundaries. So that's part of the divine feminine, do no harm. Then divine masculine, absolutely needed, and barely anyone teaches this. So it definitely is needed, which is to defend yourself a self-defensive principle is very important, because some people just let parasites attach to them, and they are all it's kind of like fake love and light, or false light, and it allows for bigger things to take hold and then mess with them and then get them an ego, and it's like a false light hierarchy system that pretends it's like evil that surrounds themselves with light energy to make them look better, and then
I would agree. And I mean, there's been many books written on psychic self-defense, most famously by Dion Fortune wrote one. And this book came along, if you know the history of, let's say, our Western mystery tradition, that going back into the Golden Dawn at the time of the separation of Dr. Israel Regardie, who went on to do Jungian psychotherapy and related ceremonial magic to that. He came out of the Golden Dawn and was working under Aleister Crowley, broke off from him, went out to Dion Fortune for some refuge. Crowley, of course, was causing magical wars. And it's interesting that these magical wars that they were using, that they were doing at this time, let's say we go back into the 1800s and all this period when people are exploring the Golden Dawn and things like that. They had a few interesting psychic self-defense techniques, and one of them was called assuming the god form position, where you take something like a god or a goddess or something that has been worshipped by thousands of people, and it created an archetype. You assume that form, you dress like them, you act like them, and you take that energy on as yourself to fortify yourself. Of course, people have traditionally used something known as the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagrams, if you look it up. And there's another very, very good book by Ted Andrews on Dragon Hawk Publishing. Of course, he was formerly a Llewellyn author, and the book is called Psychic Protection. I also strongly recommend that. I think a very simple exercise someone could use for psychic self-defense is, first of all, to cleanse their auric field or their energy by picturing like bluish or white spiritual fire above them spinning into a tornado around their body, burning off anything, taking anything away from off the auric field that they had picked up as debris. And then, seeing a lighter energy around the body, then using a spiritual needle and thread to stitch it up, something to fortify it. But I also want to give one more shout out to somebody for, if you want to develop psychic abilities, most certainly the place to go is to go look at the teachings of Sean here. He's going to help you to open up those abilities in an incredible way. I think it's amazing stuff he does with psionics. But there's another thing you can do in the meantime. There's someone named Nikki Sutton in the UK who's done a wonderful job of making these affirmations available that are very light, that you can listen to while you sleep. For those of you who like sleeping with white noise and you like soft music, this is available on Spotify. It's available on YouTube for free. You don't have to pay for it. And just leave it on next to your bed. And I have a background in clinical hypnotherapy, and I can tell you how powerful that this is at opening up your mind and your own innate abilities. If you think about where most of your learned habits have come from, into your subconscious and your unconscious, you've literally unlearned your psychic abilities. You're seeing auras at all time. I mean, we don't have time to go into it, but I could teach you how to jog the rods and cones with your physical eyes to see auras around plants, people, everything. You don't even have to be clairvoyant. But if you think about it, we have a syntax in our language of like the colors that we see. She was feeling blue. I'm seeing red, green with envy. Look at the colors that you wear oftentimes, or the colors in your auric field. I guess I'm screwed today. I'm wearing black. So who knows what that's all about. But I will tell you this, that these abilities that you have that you've shut down yourself, it's sort of like if I talk to you right now, Sean, about your nose. You're seeing your nose at all times, but your brain has blocked it out. So if you start listening to affirmations and suggestions while you're sleeping, that you're opening your pineal gland, you're opening your abilities, you're allowing yourself to have precognition, clairvoyance, which means clear seeing, clairaudience, clear hearings, and hearing these sort of ideas that clear cognition, of clear knowing, these empathic energies will come to you. You'll start to feel, see, and hear things all around you. And know when to turn them on and off. That's also important.
Yeah, and then building yourself up so that you can feel well. With my empathic ability, the big turn around to where I felt like, oh, this is because in the beginning it starts as a blessing, the curse is being able to learn how to go inward and unite with the universe and perceive empathically that way while detaching from everything that is bullshit and finite. And that way you can do both, so you don't have to accept the air arena that is of the dark, imprinting and overloading. And I can teach that for those that want to be empathically inept, strong and adept to where they can increase their knowingness ability. And psychic protection, absolutely beautifully put. Thank you for sharing those tools for people. I also agree. I love the different flames that people can do with different intentions that they can bring out or summon as like a showering light or flame or water or different elemental shielding and programming, geometries, colors. There's a lot of things that have been tested in the military as well as other
Yes.
medium in combat between individuals that work. And if you create a geometry in a etheric space, it holds information and memory, and then you can program it and then charge it up. And then you can make various effects and test them, especially if you're already targeted, then you can test if they work pretty easily because you have like a training partner that doesn't, necessarily doesn't want you to train you, but wants to harm you. And then that's what these I instead of demons I'd call like spiritual parasites that do harmful action or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say having a partner is very useful. And if you have a partner to practice these things with, you can develop a quantum entanglement. And do you know who's done a lot of really great work? Aside, I mean, we could go on for hours about psychical research, going back to J.B. Rhine, or even looking at Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, who has looked over at the ideas of telepathy being with entanglement and how you can get that going back and forth. But what's really also very cool that you said, and I want to give you props for this. At the beginning of the show, I don't know if people heard you say it, but you talked about the ideas of essentially what magic, Magick, magic with a K, not stage show magic, but let's say the magic that we are attaching will and intention to, and energy and visualization, which is a very big part of this. And another thing that you mentioned here with elementals, when we talk about these various densities and the intelligences and dimensions, if you look at where the various mechanisms of our earth work, and this is something that people don't look at. And I know you do because I had a conversation with you that was very in depth the other night where you were telling me about your awareness of everything, even at the quantum subspace and going down into that area. And you could do all kinds of fascinating experiments with LED lasers. You're going to be changing things and many different forms there, especially when we get into harmonics and stuff, how we can change that. But if we look at the intelligence of the elements, look at your DNA. Your DNA is essentially an antenna, and it's got the duplexing the windings for distance. And where's all this coming from? Well, if we talk to, let's say, Rupert Sheldrake, he'll talk about something around the Earth called the morphogenetic field. The morphogenetic field, we have all these instructions and things that are coming back and forth that we're receiving. And these intelligences and things that people are creating from and doing magic, even ceremonial magic, they're working with various elementals and intelligences there. And I believe that that's what the ancients were also honoring too. Like when we use the word pagan, pagan just came from the word pagani, meaning country folk. They were tapped into these aspects of nature and the energy there. So I really do believe, Sean, that when we look at religion, and when we look at all these things, we're looking at an ancient science and it should be respected.
I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what I call magic in definite. There's so many definitions. I like to hear people's definition of it, but the like science is to know, which is nescience is to not know in wording, and to know deeper into the physics of reality itself and deeper things into the unseen and how cause and effect in the external nervous system outside of the body, or people call metaphysics, but that's kind of untested and possible methods of how things work that can be made more pure. But also knowing that the observer and the physics of reality can be affected by how you believe things interact, and it is if the physics has enough of a strong foundation to cause a mechanism of occurrences in action, even if it's not at its peak of understanding, it can still cause and affect the rest of the reality. And with greater intricate knowing of the systems, that can have an even greater effect with even greater accuracy and likelihood of success. And this is waiting for people to tap into as a field. Of course, the governments don't want people to, because it empowers them and they want to maintain power. So, but all religions engage in a type of magic the way I use it in words, whether being Christianity, holy magic, or miracle, influential tech through source, their connection in their heart, or praying externally. That's and light magic is what I prefer to use. And there's varieties of it. It's just like demonized as a way to maintain control in different systems or to give your power away to others. But there's an esoteric version of every religion, which kind of flies in the face of what they tell the porch versions of Christianity or mystery schools to go into. And of course, I understand and acknowledge there are darker evil magics that go into external, giving away power as well as soul, and contract deals for fast tracking things, which may or may not work, because nobody in the media talks about the people that have done deals with demons and they don't hold up their bargain, and they just get their soul stolen and they fuck up their entire life. But that happens a lot, so I don't recommend doing any of that.
Yeah, traditionally, we would look at that as the astral light, that this light that's coming from one space over in our dimension, which is sort of a shortcut that, according to Manly Palmer Hall, and when we looked at the works of, let's say, Blavatsky and others, they warned about this, that this astral light was brought in along with those beings to kind of give a shortcut to things coming into our world, hence the term that was coined as black magic over, let's say, white magic. And the idea of where we get real power is soul power from the oversoul. As according to Emerson and Thoreau, we're a compound creature. And I think it's really interesting that you brought up Christianity in that way, because when you look at what Blavatsky and the Theosophists talked about, she talked about something known as the secret doctrine. And the secret doctrine is that we find this divine spark, like beads that have been woven together of all these religions and traditions that come together. If we look at them, there is a universal doctrine there that's been passed down to us that is very ancient, and it's for people at various levels of understanding. But I truly believe there is one supreme being at the source of life, and we call it the source, the Great Spirit. Some call it God, some call it Allah, but it exists in all things, and we're all a part of it. Once we move past that eye or the subject bubble, that there is a single sovereign source. And I think that's an amazing realization to have.
Yeah, it's within everyone, waiting for them to realize.
Absolutely, at the core. Hey, before we go today, can we give a shout out and tell everybody about the upcoming conference where you're going to be featured as a speaker, talking about these very amazing things? And I might talk about a couple things too, because I never shut the hell up. But I want to say that this is very exciting. What's that?
Thank God you don't shut up.
Well, thank God you don't shut up. And the great news is that there's going to be lots of like-minded people. I strongly urge you all to come out there. It is in Tampa, Florida. There's an amazing conference there that is called
if you want to get your tickets, go to fulldisclosuremovement.org. It's Full Disclosure Now conference, and it's in near Tampa, Florida, St. Pete's Beach. And we'll be both speakers. So get your tickets if you can. They're selling out fast. And if you
July 15th through the 18th, right?
That depends on the
July
state.
15th through the 18th. Yeah, it's so that it's getting close. Everybody get your tickets. You do not want to miss this conference. We have just amazing speakers and topics there and subjects you're not going to get anywhere else. They're not watered down, they're not censored. You know, the kind of stuff that you're getting from Sean, I'll just tell you this. This is the kind of stuff that they do in government military studies. If you look at, let's say, the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, look at Dr. Hal Puthoff, Uri Geller, Ingo Swann, Pat Price, who was like one of the greatest remote viewers. He was a Burbank police officer since 81. He was murdered, by the way, because he was getting a little too close to look at some of that Russian stuff back then. But I want to say this information that you're getting from Sean and these speakers is well worth coming for. So make sure you're there.
And you absolutely, you got a knowledge reservoir that knows no bounds, and you have tapped into the endless library in your heart, and you bring that out with vibrancy and elegance each day as you wake up, and you fill your cup of that knowledge fountain deep within, and it drives you to beyond limits, and which helps this world beyond what people know or realize or should be giving you gratitude for, which I am very grateful as well. And yeah, you enjoy his. What is your presentation going to be about, by the way?
My presentation is called Unseen Masters and Invisible Worlds. It might be the other way around. Invisible Masters and Unseen Worlds. It's one of those. So you can just switch it around. It's kind of, it works either way. Either way, we're going to be going into the great world of the unknown. And I got to tell you, there's like between you, Sean, and Rion, and the folks that are speaking, I just can't believe it. We have Drago Reed, we have Carrie Cassidy, Miles Johnson, one of my very dear friends, Daniel Brinkley's there, Julia Cammon's there. I mean, the speakers list is endless. There's so many awesome people there talking about subjects that I know for a fact. Trust me, if there's somebody who's been to a lot of conferences that's seen who gets censored and who doesn't get to speak, you're going to get to see a lot of the forbidden stuff that's just too edgy, too informative, ridiculously on the edge that you need to see. It's going to be great. And what an amazing, beautiful location to do it in.
You know, right? So many, like over 30 plus speakers and all in one place. And you get to meet them and become friends and connect, and it's like going to lead to so many different timeline shifts on the individual and the collective. So I'm psyched for it. And there's going to be ETs above the.
And I just got off the phone with Robert Sepper, and Sepper looks like he's probably coming out with some other people too. So we're going to have a lot of fun doing the CE5, contact protocols and everything. What a great time to connect with people.
Beautiful. Yeah. So if you want to interact with positive ETs that will be coming, as well as soul family that are like-minded like you, then definitely once in a lifetime opportunity. And also will be streamed online if you really can't make it, but I recommend going if you can, because it will change so much beyond just what you see in the presentations and the people coming together. And there's going to be fun too, because a lot of people have fun with those events that I've gone to. So good times. And yeah, we can go ahead and go into how people can reach you. And we can go into answering one or two questions on the chat. Just
yeah, sure. How people can reach me, you can find me on Instagram at esoteric Jonny. You can also find me on Facebook just as Jonny Enoch. That's JONNYENOCH. I do have a website, but it's currently being restructured to have some classes in different ways of learning on there. So it's being rebuilt at the moment. So just find me on socials. So you said we have some questions.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure you plug everything. Any other projects or books or conferences you're going into that other people should look out for as well?
I do, but these projects that are coming together right now, I can't talk about them quite yet, but we have some exciting stuff coming up in the fall toward the end of this year, then coming up. Even next year is going to be busy, but I'll make those announcements soon. And I'm sure you and I will do a video again soon talking about some of these amazing realities.
Oh yeah, a very mind-blowing show we went into it. It's very exciting, good topic to bounce off each other. It's very thriving. I think a lot of people love it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so and their audience, let us know if you like this. Yeah, I'm Sean Bond of Sonic League, Sonic League YouTube and sonicleague@gmail.com if you want to contact me. There's courses, membership site with many video procs for different ability teaching, doing mystery school workshops. So feel free to message me if you want to be involved in that, in inquiry, as well as gonna possibly do other conferences such as the one in Florida that is in between July 15th to 18th. So in a few days. And whatever you're seeing in the future if you're seeing this video. And yeah, I'm also doing tours around the planet, different sacred sites, places of power, pyramids, etc. I'll be doing a next one in Mexico. So if you're interested in that, or different places around the planet like Japan, Tibet, England, and the different portals to different realms, etc., to bring to life the various places to make it safe and protected to where it can grow exponentially, and then the spirits of that place reward you with abilities, then contact me. And also, me and Jonny might be doing interesting things in the future as things unfold. So let us know in the comments if you like this video and if you want to see more of it. We motivate us to do more. And smash that like, subscribe to both our channels. Do you have a YouTube or anything?
I do. Thank you very much. It's Jonny Enoch. Just youtube.com/Jonny Enoch. But yes, everybody, I concur with what Sean said. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this video with all your friends, your aunties, your uncles, your brothers, your sisters. Get it out there. Put it all over the socials.
Anyone you know that's getting into esoteric and questioning reality, show them this video to inspire them to go beyond their limitations and stop arguing for them. And yeah, it's share as many places as possible. The more we see the views, the more motivation we have to do more videos. And yeah, we'll do a little bit of questions before we go, just because it was live and I like people. One guy, this would be good for you to answer. Do you guys have any more info on the red light glasses military Vatican has to see demons?
Very interesting. I know of a case that a friend of mine in England named Harry Challenger wrote about, that there was a doorman that was working on a case that was documented in his magazine called the Flying Saucer Review. Now, the Flying Saucer Review is one of the most distinguished publications on UFOs that has been put out in the world, and it goes back a long way in England. And in fact, it was privately sponsored by Prince Philip's Equerry. And there was a doorman that was using this sort of red light, what was it called? A polariscope. That he was using this sort of red light and the backwards reflector from a telescope that was seeing beings come in his room, and he was documenting this, which is rather fascinating. What I do know is that the Vatican has lots of different understanding of not only extraterrestrials, but they, of course, inherited a lot of the remnants of the Library of Alexandria. And it's not like that knowledge has never been seen. Napoleon had that place raided. That's what Eliphas Levi went in and copied in his Histories of Magic, which later on Albert Pike copied down into Morals and Dogma, which became, material for the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in the United States, and also led to the tax seal hoax. But in the Vatican area, I've talked a lot about what they have there through a friend of mine, Danny Sheehan, who is a Jesuit trained lawyer, and he has talked to them about the records that they have there. There is much greater technology available than just the red light glasses or different glasses that can see into the. He's probably talking about tech that can see into the infrared or outside of the, into the ultraviolet and all that. There, like I mentioned during the show, there's these silicon hexagonal structures that are 1 atom thick that you can look up. We've injected them into the eyeballs of mice, but now they do have better technology to do this. They have this now into more of a temporary solution that can work as eye drops, that if you use them in your eye drops, you can see into these areas. Now, these are not just used for seeing outside of a regular light spectrum for just the purposes of intelligence, multi-dimensional intelligences, but they're also used for military defense purposes. So that's what I would say on that one. Do you have anything to add to that about the red glasses?
This topic. This is a really awesome show. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. Love that I can increase my frequency of projection and thought and words to a level that somebody can comprehend. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the questions. This audience is amazing.
Thanks for having me.
I've heard of different stories, like one, for instance, is of military getting signed to them new equipment in an infrared spectrum that was a next level, and they were to test it out. And after a while of going back and forth and being in helicopters using it in night, they started seeing these weird winged demon-like looking entities flying besides the helicopter, and then the guy on the machine gun's like, oh, what the hell, and then starts shooting at it, and then it's like there's nothing there, and then the others start putting the goggles on and like, oh, they see it too, and then it being this kind of event, but the bullets passing right through it doesn't do anything, to the point where the military stopped using them. There are different levels of infrared that I believe people can tap into, and there's a lock on to avoid seeing those things with some of the ones that are in the public. Generation 4, I believe infrared is or higher. You can start seeing weird things like UFOs in the sky that wouldn't be there unless you see them through infrared. So I recommend that if you want to go UFO hunting. It's easier to interact with those beings consciously, whether they be a ship or an actual plasma light being that wants to say hello and play with you. There's some interesting things you can see in that. But if you go even higher, then you start seeing things that you might not want to see or are ready to see or do anything about, which is the layers of why the veil is quarantining. Because if you see something that's scary, it kind of messes with you and then brings you to a point of fear, where that being, usually they project a eminence that is fearful so that they can have their victims generate fear so they can feed off it, and then empowers them with their energy, which then gives them more authority over the person's reality, which is the crux of why those veils are there in the first place as a survival mechanism. Another just thing to go off of what somebody asked, is it necessary to experience lower density beings and entities in order to grow spiritually? What would you say to that?
I don't think it's necessary at all. In fact, I'd recommend against it. It sucks. I've had it. I've been targeted by them severely to the point where I wouldn't recommend it for my worst enemy. I'll tell you that it's an initiation. It's a toughening up experience, though. When you have it happen to you, as you know, Sean, you can speak to this, that once it happens to you and you're targeted very, very badly by it, I'll say there's no words to describe how much it sucks. But when you pull through it, you learn that your light is more powerful, and you learn a way to overcome it, and that truly it encourages us all to live a more spiritual life, to be stronger in our energy field, to be stronger in our heart, to know who we are, to look at that we are very powerful beings and we can overcome anything. But I do believe that there's a lot of people that do experience these beings on a constant, nonstop, daily basis. There's like a parasite, as we discussed, and they're not aware of it, that their very actions, the type of thought and lifestyle that they have is conducive to these beings that are feeding off of them. But yeah, you don't need to achieve, you don't need to experience these lower level beings to experience a sort of spiritual awakening. I think there's a lot of people around us who are naturally very high vibrational beings. And I just want to throw this caveat in really quickly about what it means to have high vibrational or low vibrational sort of activity. I think this can also be dictated through diet also. Like if you're eating a lot of high vibrational foods, like citrus foods, Citrus fruits, if you're eating meat, staying away from things like too much red meat, which takes longer for your body to digest. I think that's going to lower your vibration. If you eat like white meats, for example, if you eat meats, obviously that's not a concern for you if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, obviously. Drinking enough water, spending enough time in nature, and the general thoughts that you have and emotions that you carry, all of these things play a factor on a healthy, energetic body and field. But what would you say?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that all into their perspective. Yeah, I don't think people need to do it. I don't go looking for it. It's more of a necessity. In most people on the planet in some way, shape, or form has attachment and targeting, which then goes back to some form of consciousness. Depending on how high the level of consciousness is, that will go into that too. But most people, there's a system of safety to where it's like grass growing. You don't want to be the highest grass grower, or else you get chopped down, or at least be perceived that way to where you're camouflaged. So I recommend the strategy of being camouflaged as much as possible for as long as possible while growing as much as you can before and inevitably something might end up finding out and then targeting a person, which then it's good to be prepared and then ready to overcome those challenges, because this world is full of them. It's been invaded quite a number, and that's the reason people are incarnating here, is to bring back the planet to light after catastrophes and invasions that happen to this world, and then bring it back into natural law and harmony with the function of unity, instead of what evil uses, which they do not earn authority, they steal it. So if you know that those parasites shrink down, and it's also the dumbness of the dark sorcerers, where they attain power. That power is ultimately not theirs, some other beings, and then that being they're getting it from, it's not theirs to begin with. They stole it, so it's temporary at best, and can be pulled out from underneath them. As well as there's a lot of caveats with it, because it's they want power themselves, so they're stupid. It's more of you're getting forced in that position, and then to grow, it is useful, in which you can test your shield, your offense, defense, fortress, your ability to protect yourself, redirect, defensive, and keeping back and getting a deterrent strong enough to where those forces don't want to mess with you or think twice, or sent to a place like with banishing, to where they can't even mess with you anymore. And those are the boundaries I recommend training in those situations. And you are all more powerful than them, because you have tapped in connection to source. And if you're not evil, then you have an even more ability to pull out that light to shine on those situations, and to even be a cure if you're in the healer pathway, to where you can bring demons with boundaries and detachment to where they can be empathically turned on again and remember themselves and not be insane anymore, and turn on their light, and they no longer need you, and they see you as an antidote, which is what I love to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, that there's a lot of people that will do jinn magic, or they'll work with the Goetia, or they'll do a system where the idea is that the magician would take an authority over these beings to return them to their true will, or their true purpose and creation. But oftentimes there would be a pact or a deal made with these intelligences, that they would be given something in return for what they're doing for the practitioner, to get this knowledge and whatnot. And actually, it's quite a complicated science. There's usually a circle that is put together. And this is very interesting, because whenever you see something to do with these sort of spiritual, I want to call them consciousness technologies, we see the circle being used a lot. Not only in a fairy ring circle where people go missing, such as in the Welsh story of Llewellyn and Rhys, or we see a healing circle, we see a magic circle, a seance circle. And that's because I think when you see this circle, even when we look at wormholes and tunnels, is that reality, as it combines with time, And time, by the way, as I was just talking about in the last day, is a sentient existence. It's woven into every subatomic particle and is what gives all carnal existence. It's the phenomena of free will, but time can be bent, warped, and twisted. So we have to look at the circle, this circuitous pattern, as being very important within this science. And then other things are observed also, like from the day and the hour that is used. So I'll give you an example. So when we look at the days of the week, as most people know, let's just look in the French. You see that each of them has a corresponding planetary component. In the French, it's very easy. You see lundi, which is lunar day, Monday. That's why the moon, moon. That's why we have lunatics, because of people of the full moon. Lunar day, luna. Lundi, mardi, Mars day, Tuesday. Mercredi, which is Wednesday. Mercury day. Lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, vendredi. So jeudi is Thursday or Thor's day. Jupiter. Friday is vendredi or Venus day. Samedi is Saturday or Saturn day. Dimanche, Sunday, the day of the sun. So if you wanted to draw a Saturnal being, let's say, you would do it on the day of Saturn, which is okay. So you get Saturday, or let's say we want to get a being associated with Jupiter. So Jupiter would be Thursday. Jupiter is associated with good fortune, and let's say financial matters, abundance. The hour of Jupiter is 8 o'clock. So if you look up the times and the dates, so you would see in the magical systems, we'd say Thursday at 8 o'clock, let's say the corresponding aspect of when we'd call on the entities or intelligences associated with this. And in magical systems, it's very interesting because, as you mentioned, that there are elementals out there, but there's also zodiacal aspects and aspects within, the planetary connections that we find that all affect this electromagnetic energy. But within this communication system, there seems to be a means of calling on these entities and beings. And of course, another component, just to rewind it back to the beginning of the show, for those that might have missed it, we were talking about psychical perceptions and workarounds that some folks have used alchemy, like consuming these alchemical liquids or fluids, and then other practices that they have to make it more enticing for these beings to show up. And in some cases, they have even used sex magic and other means to raise the energy up or offer some kind of louche or energetic calling card to these folks that come in. And these beings can very much manifest or be seen, and deals are struck. I do think that there are folks that get themselves in very big trouble in some of these groups because they've gotten way over their head and they don't realize that these beings are infinitely more intelligently aware than they are when it comes to these deals that are made. And so at times you can start to see those that have practiced these things, they start to have the signs of their health failing. You look at their skin, you look at their eyes, their body, it's like basically they look like a walking zombie, and like they lose control of their own vehicle after a while. It's almost like there's nothing there behind their eyes. So I've seen it go very bad for folks as well doing that. And I'll just end on one last thing with that, is that in the esoteric or the occult, and the occult just means hidden or clandestine, by the way, there's a differentiation of when you say evocation and invocation. So an evocation, as you know, Sean, I saw you give your nod, and I know this is your area. You specialize in magic and the esoteric as well. So evocation is calling something out, whereas an invocation is when you're calling something in. So in turn, when you usually work with angels, an angel comes from the Greek angelos, meaning messenger. With the angels, you'd usually like say their name and then you'd intone it by breathing in their name as you say it. So the invocation is very much different than working with those folks on a lower dimensional density plane.
Right, yeah, and it's also differentiating between higher beings and positive
Precisely. You just read my mind. That's what I was thinking.
versus external, earthly, infernal, demonic,
Correct.
Or neutral or negative beings. And I'd say there's a use for each, but like evocation is kind of like giving a shotgun to a monkey. Not a lot of people are ready for it, and a lot of people are egoic and they think they're ready for that. And it's like containing a nuclear bomb. And I don't think that's something that many people could even touch upon in a lifetime. And with the limited amount of data that we have, so it's likely to blow up in people's face.
Yeah, one thing that's really important that
I don't
just I'll
like.
throw this into that uh what is really a key that people are forgetting too, that it's probably a good thing that this has been hidden, and you're not going to find it in books that you'll pick up over at your local bookstore, but there's certain words and there's certain things that can be toned or intoned, or certain geometry which you touched down on, that has been used for a very, very long time. And you might say these are certain hidden keys that are hidden from most people, that are prehistoric even, that have been put aside for certain hidden fraternities, those that you'll even never know the name of, that some folks that they'll get invited to these certain groups or get this knowledge, but this knowledge is kept away for a very good reason. Manly P. Hall at one point went around all around Europe gathering up grimoires and things that he found that would be problematic if they fell into the wrong hands, and so he had put it underneath PRS in Las Vegas to hide it from the general public from getting their hands on it. So there are very real means of opening these doors for people to look for it, but they should proceed with caution.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Be very cautious with this topic. A lot of people got big swing dick syndrome about this. Like invocation is a lot nicer and safer. But there's layers to it. So I'd recommend just like telepathic conversation, and then an interaction of trade with like sources and your higher self. And there's like the bringing down the moon ritual, which is a concept of bringing your higher self more into your body, which is interestingly a powerful thing, but not many people know how it works. They just have like an intuition and then have a setup system for it. It's kind of like also similar to channeling, but that's like a opening to a communication system that then can get also fucked with. So there's dangers with all this stuff that people need to be cautious with. Evocation, I don't have any use for it at all, other than force summoning negative beings that are attacking to me to a quarantine realm. So I don't have any use for it around me, unless it's kind of like a prison binding kind of tech that like contains something to the dark sorcerers use it to make deals with them and then allow them to be freed after they succeed in returning the deal. I don't recommend.
Can I throw this in based on what you said? You talked about like the drawing down of working with the oversoul or working with the higher self. I want to say exponentially that that the white magic, or what you described of tapping into the oversoul or the higher self and these higher realities of the true you, that is far more powerful. It takes more work and more development, but once you do that, that's where the real secret to the real power, energy, connectivity is the astral light, or working with these lower density, lower dimensional beings and energies. It will give quicker results if you find the keys, and that's what corrupted the Egyptian priestcraft. However, the true power that comes from within all of us, that's already there, you're already connected to it, is from source. And so once you go into your heart, like you talk about, Sean, that what you described there is the most powerful for those that attain it. The
Exactly.
victory of the soul over circumstances.
Yeah, any ability you see or out there, a lot of the magic books are kind of like limited to the dark or neutral. Which is interesting that they've been corrupted and messed with for so long. But there's a light version of every ability, because it usually origins with the light, because the dark, is mimicking it from a state of lack of light, and then a bunch of the other things it pulls out from the void mother. But most evil and darkness just steals. It's not actually drawing upon the void like they should be. But yeah, and this topic could go forever. But yeah, people be careful. Know a lot. no more than what is told to you and what you read, and learn about the consequences and the blowback too before you engage with anything, because you could be signing up for that. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you all, and thank you so much, Jonny, for being with us.
Thanks for having me on your show.
And video. That will be a treasure on our sites. So look forward to talking with you more. And again, subscribe to both our channels and look up the future event at fulldisclosuremovement.org to see us speak. And look for more videos of us, and share this wherever you can if you want to see more of this content. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Love.